Okay, let's do this.
How long should you stay in a calorie deficit?
I wonder on average how many times I say calorie deficit per day. It's gotta be over under 100. What do you think? It's gotta be over 100. I'm going 100. Are you over or under? I say calorie deficit more than 100 times a day or less than 100 times a day. I'm gonna go over. I don't know, 100's a lot. I'm going over. YouTube, welcome back to the video. Hope you're doing super well. In this video, we're gonna be talking about how long should you stay in a calorie deficit. We're gonna talk about your metabolism. We're gonna talk about your specific situation. We're gonna talk about, are you gonna ruin your metabolism? We're gonna talk about the mental aspect of things. A lot of stuff we're gonna cover here in this video today. First, gonna be starting off with special unicorn. And what I mean by this is you are a special little unicorn, and you're an individual is what I mean. You are an individual who has individual things going on in their life. Like, for example, you might be somebody who has 100 pounds to lose, or you might be somebody who has 5 pounds to lose. So clearly, I don't know if you heard those dogs. You hear that? Somebody's not very happy with their dogs. The person who has 100 pounds to lose is going to be in a calorie deficit longer than somebody who has 5 pounds to lose for a few reasons. Number one, it's just going to take that individual more time in the grand scheme of things to lose 100 pounds than to lose 5 pounds. So from that aspect, it just kind of depends on how much body fat, how much weight you have to lose. It also just depends on your lifestyle. Like, for example, I've had clients who they're a mom of 3 kids. They work out 3 times a week. They might, they try to get 5,000 steps per day. They don't sleep the best. They have a lot of stressful things going on. Cool. That individual might just be in a calorie deficit for a longer period of time because it might just take that individual longer to reach their goals. Whereas I've had, for example, I've had kids like straight out of college. I say kid, I'm only 24. But I've had people straight out of college who are like, hey, listen, like I live by myself. I live on my own. I do all my food shopping. I do all my meal prepping. I go to the gym 5 times a week. I have all the time in the world. I have this job, but I don't, it's just a desk job. I can do whatever. And so that person is able to go like, full force, 110% into their nutrition, into their workouts, so on and so forth. So that individual might be in a calorie deficit longer because they're able to be, more spot on, and they can, they can quote unquote speed the process up a bit because they can just dedicate more time to their fitness and nutrition because they don't have anything else going on. So it just kind of depends on your current lifestyle and your lifestyle factors as well. Like for example, I'll use myself. I don't really go out much. I don't drink at all. Like I don't really go out to eat very much. So for myself, for example, I would have a easier time adhering to a calorie deficit, which would make me probably be in a calorie deficit shorter because I can adhere to it better because I don't have a life. Whereas you might have a life where you have a social life where you go out to eat with your friends or your spouse or this and that. And so, it might make things a bit more difficult sometimes. So, for example, you might be in a deficit longer than me. Doesn't mean that's good, bad, or indifferent. Just means that the process you're going to take to get there just looks different. That's all. So that's being said, and also the person who has 100 pounds to lose versus the person who has 5 pounds to lose, the person who has 100 pounds to lose is going to see less negative side effects from being in a calorie deficit for a longer duration of time, as opposed to somebody who has 5 pounds to lose who is in a calorie deficit. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about biofeedback later in the video, but just kind of keep that in mind as well, because the person who only has 5 pounds to lose to get to their goal body weight, they don't want to be in a calorie deficit for as long of a time as somebody who has 100 pounds to lose, because it's just not going to turn out well. And again, we'll touch more on that here in the biofeedback section. So next session comes from aggression. And what I mean by here is like, how aggressive are you going into your calorie deficit? And basically what that means is how low are you going in calories? Because the more aggressive you go, normally the shorter you're going to stay in a calorie deficit. The less aggressive you go, normally the longer you are going to be in a calorie deficit, but it's probably not for the reasons you think. Oh, and by the way, if you want to know how many calories you need to eat to lose weight, just head here, somewhere up here, head there above after this video. I have a totally free calorie calculator here on YouTube. Again, it's totally free, so feel free to check that out after this video. But I talk about how aggressive you're gonna go into a calorie deficit. And let's just take, for example, let's take eating 1,700 calories versus eating 1,200 calories. Let's say you're gonna eat 1,200 calories. You're probably gonna be in a deficit for a shorter amount of time for any one of 2 reasons. more than likely the second reason, but first reason being, if you actually stick to it, then you'd probably lose weight at a faster rate. And I say if you actually stick to it because the point number two is going to be, it's that much harder to adhere to that low calories, right? And not only harder to adhere to, but also coming along with some different, like, how it affects your metabolism and stuff like that, which again, we'll talk about later in the biofeedback section. But for the purpose of this section right here, we're going to talk about your adherence. And so if you actually stuck to a more aggressive calorie deficit, yes, technically you would lose weight faster. But in practicality, what I've seen coaching hundreds of people by now, the fact is you're not going to be able to sustain that long term. So what's going to happen is you're going to do an aggressive deficit and then not be a deficit. So you'll diet for 2 or 3 weeks and then you'll kind of fall off and not diet. You'll diet for 2 or 3 weeks and then kind of fall off and not diet, right? So you're going to kind of go in this up and down cycle. So in that instance, you probably wouldn't be in a deficit very long. And it's not because you're even making progress at that point. It's because you keep restricting your calories and then you go off and binge. And you restrict your calories and then you go off and binge. So technically from that aspect, it really wouldn't be quicker. And the long-term approach, taking a more moderate approach, eating 1,700 calories, that would actually be a quicker progress in the long term when you think about it. Because again, let's say you eat 1,200 calories and you lose weight, but then you gain weight. And you lose weight and then you gain weight, right? And this is on 1,200 calories. So in reality, you're not really making any progress. Whereas opposed to, let's say you ate 1,700 calories. You just kind of lost some weight, maybe quote unquote stalled out for a bit, lost some weight, stalled out, lost some weight, stalled out. And you had this trend line that was trending down. So in actuality, in 3 months, let's say on the first option with 1,200 calories, in 3 months, let's say you lose 30 pounds. But 3 months later, you gain all the 30 pounds back because again, what you're doing is not sustainable. You're eating very, very, very few calories. And so when you stop eating very few calories, you're gonna gain the weight back. And some people are gonna ask me, well, what if you just go to maintenance calories? Yeah, cool. Again, in a theoretical world, yeah, for sure, you'd be fine. But most people don't fucking do that. So that's why they eat super low calories and then binge, eat super low calories and then binge, because what they're doing is not sustainable. So let's say in 6 months, you lost 30 pounds, but gained 30 pounds. So you've lost no weight in 6 months. As opposed to, let's say you're on a 1,700 calorie diet where that's your calorie deficit. Let's say each month you lose 3 pounds. 3 times 6, 18. So in 6 months, you've lost 18 pounds, as opposed to right here, where in 6 months, you've lost no pounds. And that's why taking a more sustainable approach long term, because again, you'll be able to stay in a deficit longer, which means you'll see progress long term, because if you're in a deficit, guess what? You're going to lose body fat. So taking a more sustainable approach, it's because you'll actually see sustainable fat loss progress. So that's what it would depend. And we're going to talk about other things like, taking diet breaks and like using, aggressive approaches and then kind of taking a week diet break and maintenance and so on and so forth. We'll talk about that here in the next section. All right, so now we're going to talk about biofeedback, and this is going to encompass your metabolism. It's going to encompass your sleep, your energy, your workout performance, your sex drive, all those things. So all those things I just mentioned, workout performance, sleep, energy, hunger, sex drive, all those things, they matter. Because they matter for a few reasons. Number one, talking about adherence. Once again, if you're always tired, if you're always hungry, if you're never having fun, if your workouts suck, if you can't sleep, if you're starving 24/7, you're probably not going to stick to a calorie deficit for that long. And that means you probably won't see results because you're not sticking to something sustainably and consistently. As opposed to if you took a more moderate approach, once again, let's just call it the 1,200 versus 1,700 calories. If you took a more moderate approach, you'd have more energy, you would have more sex drive, you'd have better workouts, you would have less hunger, more manageable hunger, because when you go into a calorie deficit, some hunger is going to be normal, but it'd be much more manageable, and you would be able to stick to that consistently for a longer period of time. So how long should you stay in a deficit? It depends on your biofeedback, because I've had some people come to me or just ask me questions in sense of like, hey, Eric, like for example, I've had females come to me who have said, hey, Eric, I've lost my period, my hair is falling out, I feel like shit, I'm mentally drained, I'm physically exhausted, how can I lose more weight? And I'm like, oh my God, like, does any of that sound good to you? So for that individual, you need to stop being in a calorie deficit. You need to get your period back. You need to up your calories. You need to be okay with not losing body fat at that moment in time because your shit's broken and you need to fix it first. And I get so many people coming to me looking to continuously lose weight when their biofeedback is off. And again, if you have lost your period, let's use losing your period and or lack of sex drive. So I'll go both ways. So, losing period for women and lack of sex drive for men, which, women obviously can have lack of sex drive, but it's a whole different topic for a whole different video. But either one of those two things, do you know what that means? That means that your body is not getting enough fuel in order to maintain those reproductive systems. Because basically you're eating so few calories, you're taking such an aggressive approach, you're eating so few calories that your body is saying, hey, well, you know what? I barely have any calories coming in. I'm not gonna use this energy because again, calories are just a unit of measurement of energy. I'm not gonna use these calories to keep my cycle and or keep my sex drive. I just need to live and breathe and I need to deal with stress and so many other things. Reproductive is not an essential life function to keep you alive. Like obviously we need to be reproductive to keep the species alive, but to keep yourself alive, that hormonal process, those systems are not essential for life. So what your body says is, well, screw that, we're not doing that. Let's just focus on what we need to do in order to survive. So like that, for example, if you're having issues with anything like that, and again, this could be lack of period, lack of sex drive, very low energy, very low, bad sleep, so on and so forth. And like you're actively trying to make those things good because some people they just sleep 3 hours a night, and that has nothing to do with your calorie deficit. You're just not fucking sleeping, and like you need to sleep more. But if you're actively trying to get better sleep and you can't get better sleep, or for example, your workouts just suck week after week after week, you feel very weak, you're not increasing strength, they just aren't good workouts. And again, not just one workout, but multiple workouts in a row over a span of a few weeks, you're eating too few calories. You need to probably bump your calories back up. So things like that would depend on how long should you stay in a deficit. If you've gotten to a point where your biofeedback just sucks shit, well, you probably should cut it for right now, increase your calories, feel better, have better workouts, have more energy, have more sex drive, get your period back. And again, all these things encompass your metabolism, which I'll touch on here as well. Your metabolism, here's the deal, your metabolism is going to slow down when you go into a calorie deficit. So don't let anybody fear-monger you into thinking that you're gonna ruin your metabolism. And even if you have lost your period, for example, you can get it back. I promise. For the most part, you can get it back. I want to say I promise, because for the most part, every client I've worked with, I've been able to get their periods back for them. I do know some people who have not, and that's, I'm not going to speak on that. But for all my clients I've worked with, we've gotten their periods back. So you're not going to, it's not irreversible. In the same way, when you decrease your calories, your metabolism automatically slows down because you're not giving it the amount of food it's used to. But the same thing happens when you go into, when you increase calories, go to maintenance calories, or go to a calorie surplus. Your body is going to speed up its metabolism because now it has more fuel, so it's going to burn more fuel. So don't get too caught up in like ruining your metabolism. But that being said, if your biofeedback is not where it should be, you should probably take a step back from the calorie deficit and focus on increasing calories and get yourself in a good place first. And then from there, if you still have fat loss goals, you can kind of get back into things from there. Taking probably a more sustainable, less aggressive approach. So that was number 3. Now number 4, blank weeks. So, the question of how long is it gonna take me to lose weight, that kind of coincides with how long should you stay in a calorie deficit, because I think obviously if you're watching this video, you probably have a fat loss goal you wanna get to, a weight loss goal you wanna get to. So, you would have to reach your goal in order to then no longer be in a calorie deficit, because now if you wanna weigh 150, I almost fell. If you want to weigh 150, you should probably get to 150. And so how long is it going to take you? Well, once again, it depends. It depends on how much body fat you have to lose. It depends on what you've been doing in the past. It depends on a few things. It depends on your training. It depends on your diet history, so many things. But generally speaking, losing anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5 pounds per week on average is generally a healthy, sustainable rate of weight loss. Now, I said on average because 1 week you could lose 2 pounds, and 1 week you could lose no pounds. Hell, 4 weeks can go by, and this has happened to multiple of my clients. 4 weeks can go by with not losing any weight, which, by the way, that's not a weight loss plateau. That's just a part of the process, so stop freaking the fuck out when you don't lose weight in 2 days. if 4 weeks goes by and you lost 0 pounds, but on the 5th week you lose 5 or 6 pounds, which by the way I've seen happen multiple times. Like I'll put some pictures here. I've seen it happen multiple times. Then you've lost 5 pounds in 5 weeks, which is an average of 1 pound per week. So anywhere in between 0.5 to 1.5 pounds per week on average. And I will say this as well. Once again, you're not going to lose weight every single week, so don't expect that. So, let's just use the 1 pound per week, for example. If you have 30 pounds to lose, you think, oh, okay, in the middle, 1 pound per week, 30 weeks. Yes, but 2 things. Number 1, you're not going to lose weight every single week. So that might be pushed to, 32 weeks or 33 weeks. So, that's number 1. But number 2, listen, there's going to be times where you go over your calories. There's going to be times where you don't track your calories. There's going to be times where you have a birthday party you went to for your son or your friend or your spouse or whoever, and you overate on calories. And you're not going to be perfect, right? So, I always tell my clients, probably add 4 to 12 weeks to whatever that time frame was. So let's say if you want to lose 30 pounds, that's 30 weeks. I would add, let's just call it 6 weeks. So make it 36 weeks or 38 weeks. Add anywhere between 4 to 12 weeks just because life happens. And kind of on that same note, I want to talk about diet breaks and things like that, because I've gotten a lot of questions about, well, this person said that I should eat my maintenance calories for a week because it's going to save my metabolism and so on and so forth, or it's going to help me lose weight better and yada, yada, yada. I'm eating too little and not losing weight. Here's the deal. If you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. And what I've seen just coaching real clients in the real world that we live in, I don't normally structure diet breaks per se. I don't say, hey, okay, we're gonna diet for 4 weeks and then we're gonna take a diet break. I don't normally do that because normally speaking, they just kind of happen, right? You're gonna have a weekend where on Friday night, you kind of go over on calories. Or you're gonna have this day where you kind of go over on calories because it was your birthday or your kid's birthday, you had some cake here and there. It's those days are already kind of worked in. So to take a diet break for the purpose of losing weight faster or losing weight more optimally, again, in the real world, just working with real people, it's not something I do a ton. Now, with that being said, you'll kind of laugh. It's what I do with myself. And I'll say this because last year I went through a little mini cut phase, an 8-week mini cut phase, where I was like, cool, 8 weeks, I'm going on a calorie deficit. I'm going to lose body fat in 8 weeks. I'm going to be done, right? So that was more of a structured approach where I said, hey, I'm going to lose fat for 8 weeks. I'm going to get to this date. I'm going to go. I had a vacation I wanted to go on. I went on vacation. I had a great time, all-inclusive resort, all the food in the world, everything. But that was more of a structure, right? So, I said, hey, during these 8 weeks, I'm going to be spot on. I'm going to be I'm going to do everything I possibly can in these 8 weeks because I know in my head it's only 8 weeks. So I'm going to push extra hard. And there were days where, for example, I didn't want to get up and get my steps, or I maybe wanted to, eat this food or that food, but I wanted to make sure I stayed in my deficit and so on and so forth, right? So for myself and other individuals, maybe yourself, it could be beneficial to kind of map things out and say, awesome, for 4 weeks, I'm going to go on a calorie deficit. For 1 week, I'm going to take a break. 4 weeks deficit, 1 week break, right? And so you could kind of play the game like that if you're somebody who would benefit from that. But again, I've just seen most people, they kind of just take those breaks kind of, it just happens. Nobody's going to be perfect. And it's very hard to, it's one thing for me who I don't have kids. I don't have, my responsibilities are my clients and my work and so on and so forth and my workouts, and so I don't have other responsibilities outside of that really. But if I had kids and a spouse and this and that and so on and so forth, probably would be a bit more difficult to map out every single week and be oh yeah, cool, I'm gonna take a diet break. This week's gonna be perfect. It's okay, cool. What happens if you're going 4 weeks on a diet and then 1 week break? But what happens if you have 2 days here where you go off? It's oh well, fuck. Do you take 2 days off from here and then you do this and do that? It's just be as consistent as you possibly can. Be anywhere from 85 to 95% consistent, and then just let the cards kind of fall where they may there. And so kind of tying things together really quickly, we talked about special unicorn, aggression, biofeedback, and how many weeks. Let's go back to the example of losing 100 pounds versus losing 5 pounds. The individual who has 5 pounds to lose, they're not going to be in a calorie deficit for as long because, number one, they don't have 100 pounds to lose, but also number two, they're probably going to have to go into more of an aggressive deficit because they have less body fat to lose, which again, we know is less sustainable. So they're not going to be in one for as long, but also if they are in one for longer, that individual who has 5 pounds to lose, if they go into a deficit for say 10 weeks to lose 5 pounds, which is pretty goddamn good, but if they go for 15, 20, 25 weeks, well then what happens? They're going to start to lose their period, they're going to start to get too low of body fat, they're going to start to have bad energy, bad workouts, and so that's where kind of all this stuff intertwines together. And again, the person who has 100 pounds to lose or 50 pounds to lose, they can go longer without having negative biofeedback, without having negative repercussions from being in a calorie deficit, as long as it's a sustainable one. So that was the video today, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to leave I think it's a thumbs up. Leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content like this. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop below. I'll be happy to help you out as much as I possibly can. Other than that, thank you as always, and we'll talk soon.